Greetings. Well, now for that boring old saying I used to hear back in the Midwest when it was hot enough to fry an egg on a sidewalk. Hot enough for you? Yeah, I guess. Looking around the planet and the weather maps today, it seems like things are pretty hot. Now, of course, anybody who's been following some of the videos I did recently where the porta potty in Tucson melted. Okay, I believe it was 106 outside. That isn't really that special for Tucson, I don't think. But so because of that, I had to come up with an alternative explanation for why the porta potty melted. And so if you've been following me, you'll know that the porta potty melted because of a chili pepper eating contest. Yeah, Carolina Reapers. It was the gas cloud. Well, I noticed this morning in the news that England has now hit the highest all-time temperature that they have ever seen in the Isles, and there are a few parts in mainland Europe that are doing the same thing, roasting over there, as well as Texas and so on over here. But Texas is always roasting, nothing new. But England's different. Yeah, that is kind of special. They generally don't get that kind of heat experience over there. I saw pictures of some guy pouring water into the mouths of one of the palace guards with the big hairy hats, red coats. They can't break their post. They got to stand there, and so they got somebody going around putting water in their mouths. It's pretty extreme. But then again, I was watching YouTube the other day, and of course, that's where I got onto the idea about Carolina Reapers, because there are so many videos on YouTube of people trying to eat these things. People, that's poison. That isn't food, okay? But, because I have had my experiences as a young and stupid man of eating peppers that were too hot to be eaten. I learned somewhere in my early 30s that just because I was tough enough to chew it up didn't mean I should swallow it. That's the case with these. Anyway, I've been watching these videos, these poor people trying to eat these things, and well, as we Google in the AI, it says, oh, he's interested in chilies. Okay. So they started putting up these videos from England. Now, I had a lady I called Aunt Betty, who was Highland English. She had met Tom Day during World War II in England, and they had fallen in love, and so she immigrated, and she was one of my relatives, so to speak, adopted relative. Yeah, I was good friends with her daughters and all that, and they dance the Highland fling over crossed swords to bagpipes. Yeah, all that. And so we used to eat at her house all the time. But I can tell you, man, the English don't know how to cook. Oh, God. The only thing that woman could make that was actually edible was a Yorkshire pudding. Thank God she never talked my mom into coming over for haggis. If you know what that is, look it up. Anyway, so when it comes to food, salt, I think, was about the only thing Betty ever used as a seasoning. And so I was dumbfounded to find out when the AI on Google started passing down these chili pepper eating clubs in England. Yeah, they got clubs. No lie. Check it out. They get names for the clubs and everything. They run big contests, and they all sit there. It's some of it's tough stuff too. They'll start at the bottom end with maybe a jalapeno, and then they begin escalating. Yeah, it's an elimination. If you got to go for the milk, you're out. Boy, and they work it all the way up to some of the hottest peppers in the world. Yeah, they think they're nuts. That's what I think. But anyway, considering that the Tucson porta potty probably melted down due to Carolina Reaper chili gas, I thoroughly believe that the reason that England is so hot right now, breaking records, is the chili pepper eating clubs. can't possibly be global warming. We know that. The fossil fuel companies have all informed all of us thoroughly that no, global warming is a myth. This is a liberal hoax, and it's not really hot outside. It's just warmer than it was yesterday. Yeah. It's just warm weather. That's all. And in England, it's because of eating chili peppers. Yeah. we can correlate this now. But realize that whereas most of the naysayers say, oh no, it's not human caused, even if there is global warming, because of course, many people are saying, well, it's based on fossil fuel, it's the CO2, and methane that we're heating up. But actually, if I'm correct, and it is the chili peppers, that means it is human caused. It's not fossil fuel though. It's capsicum. Yeah. It's those peppers. The capsicum will do it to you every time. Yeah, anybody else who's ever had that similar experience of overindulging on them, they go in this end, but they come out the other. Trust me, just as bad. Yeah. So I have had some correspondence with a few folks down there in Texas due to the extreme heat that they're experiencing. Several of them have packed up the garden, folded it up, taking it out this year because the heat is just literally burning things out. I know this has happened to my brother even in northern Illinois. He's a fair gardener. It's my brother, right? But his stuff burns out on him too. Not enough rain, too much heat, too much erratic temperatures too. It'll be really cold one day, but then go over 100 degrees. Plants can't take that. I recently had some communication from Africa, where the gentleman's sweet potatoes were actually burning out from the heat and the drought in Africa. I was considering propagating them, what he had left, to make more and see what he could do coming up, hopefully as it cools down. So I have been getting comments back from a few people out there about how their produce is literally burning out due to the climate this year. This is bad. I mean, I'm always promoting that, hey, if it's an inflation, grow a garden, or just do it, period, anyway, because it's good. But, well, it's going to be pretty hard to combat some of the situations we see coming forward right now if the weather is becoming so hot and in some cases so dry that people can't grow food. There are upper limits for most crops on temperature. Yeah, there's mass majority of what we grow in the warm season crops actually doesn't like temperatures much over 90 or so. Some of the crops like melons and eggplants, which are real heat lovers, they'll probably climb above 100 without too much trouble for a while. But, when the things like that go on and on and on and on, plant respiration shuts down, just like it does when it gets too cold, when it gets too hot. There's a range, and we are leaving the range that a lot of vegetables successfully grow at. So this really throws a monkey wrench into the works as far as my suggestions that to fight inflation, grow food. Well, if you live somewhere where you can find enough water, that's getting tough to do too. And it's not too hot, it's still a good suggestion. But these areas are becoming more limited. They're not across the whole U.S. anymore, where at one time I might have said to all you out there in 50 states, get out and do this stuff. You got some kind of crop under your conditions that's going to work. Well, right now I'm not so sure that's true. Of course, as all you guys out there in the West have been telling me that the next big problem isn't to do with irrigating the lawns or taking a shower, it's electricity, because so much of the electricity in the West is generated by hydroelectric. Everything's going dry. They won't be able to turn the turbines. And so as heat rises, and say in Los Angeles, for instance, it's been very, very hot. And, people are living next to air conditioning units. These things draw a lot of juice. And when everybody in town turns one on, we can expect next to see brownouts, blackouts. I don't want to think about it, When it's too cold, you can always start a fire and stand next to it. But when it gets too hot, after you've stripped off every piece of clothing, and the ice cube you put on your head melted, what do you do next? If there's no juice, no electricity to run cooling devices, you're going to have to resort to, sitting in the shade, all the traditional ways, rolling in the mud. I don't know. There are a few ways that you can naturally cool the body. Shade is definitely one of them. A breeze is another. Actually, chili peppers. That's most of the guys I used to work with that were born in Mexico. That was the story. Yeah, why does he eat so many hot peppers? Oh man, because it's hot out. Makes him perspire. It's like air conditioning. It is kind of brings the blood to the surface of the skin. Well, chili peppers fit into every occasion, It's kind of funny, too. There was a time when that was a big thing for me. I was, long before anybody knew what a habanero was or a ghost chili or anything like that. I was a pepper cultivator as a young man in high school. I would show up to every beer party with a pocket full of screaming hot peppers. Beware, don't pass out at the party. I will wake you up. Those days are over. I can't eat anything hotter than a jalapeno, and I'll never eat that straight up even. You're going to make sauce or something out of it. Cook it into food. Yeah, I like jalapenos, but that's the limit. You get past that, and that's bear spray, man. That ain't food. Yeah, so if you happen to be in a hot and dry area this summer and you insist on trying to grow some food, had the garden been set up in the original way that you did business, there's still some modifications that can be made. Ordinarily, I'm one who loves to use water as a temperature control. You can drop heat with it. You can raise temperature levels against frost with water. But that isn't going to be an option. It doesn't look like in many places this year. If you are in some place where water's abundant, you have your own source or whatever, you can do this. Definitely running irrigation over your crops when it's really, really hot will help them a little bit and keep them from dehydrating. On the other hand, you can also use, like the Hopi do, windbreaks of brush. They cut brush from the desert and then stack it up and push it in along the edges of their fields to the prevailing winds, because the hot, drying winds will damage crops. It'll completely dehydrate the foliage. And so they shelter wind. This is an ancient technique. So putting up temporary wind shelters, whatever they may look like in your neighborhood, is going to help. Put it to the prevailing wind side. For most of us, that means on the west, southwest is probably the best place to block the wind in summer. Going back to more traditional techniques for gardening in extreme drought and heat, the Hopi who live in the driest part of Arizona, most stinking desert part I've ever seen, it really is. Nobody wants it, just the Hopi. They live on these mesas, and at the base of the mesas is where they tend to plant a lot of their crops in unirrigated fields. They wait until there is some kind of rainfall, and when the rain comes and it runs down the sides of the mesa, it accumulates at the base of the mesa in the soil. The soil there is very sandy, and so they begin to dig down into the sand until they can find moisture. And when they find moisture, they'll take a corn seed or a bean seed, a squash seed, and they'll place it on the moisture in the bottom of the hole. They'll then take dry desert dust and they mulch the seed at the bottom of the hole with this dry dust, kind of like a canning jar lid. They'll often be 12 inches down or more into the desert before they find any moisture right after a rain. Well, the seeds germinate at the bottom of the hole, and so you have the advantage of your cornstalk starting its root, say 18 inches down. As the plant grows up out of the hole, they begin backfilling, and so they'll end up with a cornstalk that was originally sprouted 18 inches under the soil and then grew roots out the sides, tiller roots, as they backfilled, and then grew down too, following the moisture as it retreated. This is a desert-adapted technique that's used. Also, of course, they use desert-adapted seed, too, which is important. And those of you who are interested in this idea, in Tucson, there is an outfit called Native Seed Search that has collected for decades the seeds of the southwestern pueblos in Mexico. And you can get some really cool drought-adapted stuff. I used to raise a lot of it. Most of it is not suitable for Puna, so I stopped. But in Wisconsin and California, I raised a lot of their seeds, some very interesting varieties of plants, and they're adapted to dry conditions. We're going to have to start looking that way, I'm afraid. The crops that have been traditionally used in deserts are going to become more useful, I think, in the future. Yeah, that's so the desert-adapted seed is an issue. The Zuni do what they call a waffle garden. They will tend to pick a spot where there is water somewhat pre-existing because it's a little lower in the landscape. Then they go in and they actually dig waffles. looks just like a waffle. Little square pits, and then the dikes around it and another square pit and the dike, just like a waffle. And they plant in the depression of the waffle, and the dikes are where the water is held in then and focuses. The whole system is depressed to begin with, the garden is, and then the waffles, the plants are depressed within the waffles. And this system, I believe, they do use some irrigation water with it, unlike the Hopi, but the waffles allow them to specifically direct the water only at the places where it needs to go. That's another thought, too. I don't know, I mean, we can always shade areas, like using shade cloth or something, but, by and large, vegetables are full sun-loving plants. And so they have temperature problems, but they usually don't have sun problems. They need sun. Most vegetables, when I put them out of full sun, don't perform as well. Although my mother, bless her little black heart, my mother had a garden that was boxed between a large 6-foot redwood fence and the wall of her house. Kind of a dog leg up the side there. And she gardened in there. She did pretty well. It was easterly. It was an easterly exposure. The place went into the shade mostly during the afternoon hours, but she had plenty of light in there during the morning up to about noon or so. The house wall was white, and because of the white house wall, it bounced light. It reflected light more than would have naturally been in that area if the surrounding area had been green or brown or something else. And so reflective surfaces, and particularly just plain white. Experiments were done. Tinfoil, aluminum, glass, mirrors, none of it works as well as white latex paint. You can bounce light around. The light is cooler when it's reflected than when it's direct. So it's possible to, move some crops to a little bit more sheltered type of a location from the intensity of the sun. And as long as you have good reflected light, they may grow well. It's minor things. When the temperature starts going over 100 degrees, just a little tweaking here or there can make all the difference in the world between, success and failure. Now here, we could almost be waiting for the next ice age to come on Hawaii. Hawaii's a moderately warm environment. We've had a few fairly hot days in a few places this year. Here in Mountain View, where I live at 1,600 feet, we had one day in April where it did hit 85 degrees for a couple of hours. That was the heat. And everything since has been below that. Generally, the temperatures have been mid 70s to the lowest 80s during the height of the day, mostly in the 60s at night is what's been going on here. We're not feeling the global warming. We're not getting the extreme heat out here in the middle of the ocean for some reason. We're a unique environment and a strange position, as I had said in the previous video, that we have this west to east continental flow going over the top of the islands and the east to the west continental going along the bottom of the islands. Creates some rather unusual conditions out here. Why we're not heating up? I suppose simplest way to put that is we're in the middle of a great big bucket of water. It's probably why so much of this heating that's going on in the mainland. It's continental climate stuff, big masses of land heat, and when there isn't much rain, so there's a lot of drought. Then there's a lot of insulation. The sun comes right through, and things get hot. England don't know much about what goes on over there, but I do know that the Gulf Stream is what has given England its beneficial climate. The fact that they've been able to grow crops, it's been quite livable. They're pretty far north. England is much further north than a lot of the mainland U.S. is, yet they have a good climate in general. But it's that Gulf Stream. It starts down there in the Gulf of Mexico and then comes up and around out through the Atlantic and heads towards mainland Europe. And it's this massive, nice, warm air and warm water coming out of the Gulf of Mexico that is extending into higher latitudes and giving them this nice climate that England has had, if you don't mind fog, rain, and all the other things England's famous for. But warnings have been here from scientists who obviously know nothing because they're talking about global warming instead of chili peppers. But there's a claim that the Gulf Stream is breaking down, and it's a concern that it will become erratic. And if that happens, the climate in England can go wacky. Europe, period, because France and Germany and other places in Northern Europe are affected by it. Scandinavia to some extent. So now this is what brings mild weather to that region of the world. But if it breaks down, actually summer heating could become extreme. They may find themselves freezing in winter and burning up in summer. This can happen. I don't know how many of you ever travel much up in Alaska. If you do that, and if you do it in summer, you'll notice that, man, oh man, if there aren't any clouds overhead in Alaska, and it's June 21st, so the sun is dead overhead and isn't setting. It's up there 24 hours a day for a while in midsummer. It gets really hot. It goes over 100 degrees at times. Yeah, it's not unusual because it's 24 hours of sunlight. There's no cooling, no nighttime cool down. It's just heat, 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 heat. Yeah, well, that's sort of the kind of effect that could happen. Might be happening in England. I don't know. We're going to have to figure out some way to explain why they're getting hot other than my ridiculous idea about chili pepper clubs. Nope, that's true. That's true. Sorry, I don't want to step on anybody's feet out there. Yeah, I get beat up all the time when I start talking about climate change on the channel. They tell me that it's a liberal plot, it's a Chinese plot, it's bad science. And then revelations. It's revelations, not global warming. So I think people got a whole lot of ideas about why the dog is panting in the backyard this afternoon. Mostly I say it's hot. Yeah, it's hot. What do you make of that? Yeah, it's hot. Yeah, it's been hot. Yeah, it's been hotter than usual. Matter of fact, it's been hotter than it's ever been. Sometimes. That don't mean nothing. It's just hot. Hang loose. Aloha.